Hey, Warrior Saints, Father Chris here. Welcome to our Crucifixional Life stream. Glad to have you beautiful people with us. We're laughing silly because we're reflecting back, Greg and I, on moments when we got busted. And Greg was telling a story about when he got busted for breaking a window. All right, I'll tell the story true. I was 8 years old, broke a window in a snowball fight, all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden that moment pops where you're like, do I take responsibility for it? Do I blame it on my buddy? He threw the snowball or he made me do it? Or do we just run and just hide our heads in the snow and hope nobody ever finds out? We all confront those moments where we do wrongs, even sometimes unintentionally or in the heat of the moment or in an emotional outrage, a moment of emotional being overwhelmed emotionally, that we do or say things that we wish we really didn't, and we know better. So how do we deal with that when we are confronted with those issues? How do we find ourselves really owning fully the responsibility for our actions? There's a fabulous story in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, and it is a story about Jesus entering into the town of Jericho, and a guy named Zacchaeus comes up to Jesus. And the story, we're told, Zacchaeus is a tax collector, so he's kind of like rotten, right, to the people, because the way tax collectors worked in the ancient Near East, in Jerusalem at the time of Christ, is that they would go and collect taxes from you. But if you owed them $5, they might make you give them 6. And they'd keep 1 in their own pocket, right? And they'd give the other 5 to the Roman authorities. And the people knew that the tax collectors were doing this. So not only was it illegal according to the law, but they were really unpopular with their own kin because they knew they were stealing from them. This guy, Zacchaeus, it's told he was a tax collector and he was very rich, right? Which means he'd been pilfering from his people for quite some time. And when Jesus comes, he's a short man. He can't see him over the crowd, climbs up in the tree. I'm sure you know the story. He sees Jesus and Jesus calls him down and enters his house. Now, in this moment, when Christ makes an entry into the home of Zacchaeus with his family and is seated around his table, Zacchaeus has a moment where he recognizes all of his sins. Right? He recognizes his sinfulness. He's open about it, and he could pass it off and he could blame it on, well, these people, they don't ever pay their taxes on time, so I always have to take extra, right? He could say stuff like that. He could say, well, my wife buys too many fur coats and Jimmy Choos and I needed to, have some extra cash. Or, right? All of the things that he could say to make excuses, but he doesn't do it. He says the following: Behold, Lord, half of my goods, I'm just going to give it outright to the poor. Right? And then here's the key. And if I have defrauded anyone, I've stolen from anyone, taken incorrectly, inappropriately from anyone, I restore it fourfold, right? I give it back 4 times over. And in this moment, when he was completely responsible because of his sins, but responsible for his sins and his actions, Christ says, salvation has come to this house today, right? Boom. I mean, it's amazing. It's showing us, Jesus is telling us that even someone who can be as wretched and seemingly wretched as Zacchaeus, if willing to take responsibility for his or her actions, really just fully owning them, without making excuses, without passing any part of it to someone else, this is unto salvation, which is hopeful for all of us who are Christians, hopeful to those of us who are warrior saints, is that we got to own it. Now look, here's the temptation. Like when I was in the snowball fight and broke the window, when I got called out and had to talk to the neighbor lady, my temptation, which unfortunately I submitted to, was to say, yes, ma'am, I broke the window, but little Johnny, my cousin, threw a snowball at me and I was just trying to defend myself. Now what I've done is not Zacchaeus-like. I have sort of taken responsibility, but I said it was because of him, or he did this. Right now I've thrust ownership towards someone else. In truth, I'm not responsible for little Johnny's actions. I can't control what he does, what he says, what he thinks. All I can do is take control of my actions, and if I misbehave, then I can take complete responsibility, complete ownership for them. And that's the call that you and I as warrior saints have been called to, is to be that man or woman ferocious, who's just on fire hungry to always be doing the right thing. And it's not always easy because our ego gets in the way and self-preservation gets in the way. And sometimes when we find ourselves passing it off, It's because we're trying to protect ourselves. Maybe we're not good yet at being honest with ourselves and saying, all right, I totally screwed up. I'll just own the whole thing. And so we get lost. And when we get lost there, we get stuck and we're going to end up really miserable. And those of us who don't take ownership end up miserable. But there's hope. If you, brave soul, right now, click The Way of the Warrior Saint, you are going to go to our website, which is delicious and delightful. And on that website, which is an on-demand library of instruction for you and I how to become the best man and woman that we can be, you're going to see something called The Way of the Warrior Saint. And I want to encourage you. I would say demand, but that's not appropriate, not nice. But I want to encourage you strongly that today, subscribe. It's $9, dude. $9. And when you subscribe, right? I say that funny $9 because it's not prohibitive. We want anyone that wants to have access to have access. All you need to do is subscribe. You're going to find lessons in there that will teach us how to overcome that chaos that's in the world, how to overcome the challenges that we face in the world, and ultimately how there are lessons specifically about responsibility and ownership. How we fully own it. Don't pass any part to anyone else. Let them answer for themselves. Let them confess before God. But we take ownership for ourselves. It's really awesome. And here's the cool thing. Just like Zacchaeus, when Christ says, because of this salvation, it's come into your house, so too, if you and I are willing to do that, we're going to find that we might just be one step closer towards salvation in the life which is to come, and also one step closer to being exactly who we know we're supposed to be in this life. Love you, beautiful people. We'll be back tomorrow. And as always, keep walking on the way of the Warrior Saint.